Welcome to Higher Ground, where we take you on a 20-minute trip to examine what's happening in the K-12 talent landscape and how that's playing out on the ground. We're your hosts, Christina and Josh.
I'm Christina, CEO of Agility Search. I've got more than 2 decades of experience supporting charter networks and nonprofits with their executive search and talent needs.
And I'm Josh. I run Josh's K-12 Jobs Blast, which catalogs jobs across 200 different organizations and has 36 months of job data in terms of what's happening in the K-12 market. So today we are talking about expertise and how we think about searching for people based upon skill set and understanding the market. So we'll start off. Christina, you've been doing this for more than 2 decades and are a subject matter expert. So thinking about when you're working with mission-driven orgs of all sizes, how do you pinpoint what quality, highly skilled means?
It's such a good question. We could talk about it for hours, but I think for me, I always want to start with what does the job actually require, right? So that may seem really basic, but I think it's actually a step a lot of people miss. People run right to a job description and say, okay, what is this person going to do? And who was in the job before? And what degrees did they have? Or, what background did they have? But I think really sitting back and thinking what's going to be required for this person to be highly successful, right? Is that a particular skill set? Is that an orientation? Is that something that they did before? Is that something about their background? So I think really starting there is important and an important step. But then once we go from there, then it's sort of how are we making sure that people don't just have buzzwords on their LinkedIn profile or their resume, but they've actually done the work. And sometimes, and you and I have talked about this, sometimes that's what's, do they have actual metrics, right, that they can point to? When you give them scenarios, can they actually explain things that they've done? And I think that particularly in this crowded marketplace where, I don't know about you, but we're getting thousands of applications for a lot of our jobs, the ability to very succinctly, but in a compelling way, express your skills and experience is just essential for job seekers and essential for organizations to feel comfortable, because right now it's a risk to hire someone. Everything's uncertain, right? So I think they want to really be certain that this person can be highly successful in the job. And so that's kind of a piece of it that I think is often missing.
I like that.
Yeah. And I'm curious what you're seeing in terms of trends with job seekers. Like, again, so many people are applying for jobs. And with AI, it feels like the marketplace has gotten crowded, right? Fewer opportunities than there were at least a few years ago. So what are the trends you're seeing that people should be aware of, either on the job seeker end or the employer end?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I just looked at 400 job descriptions that have been on the Jobs Blast the last couple of months and downloaded them all as PDFs, uploaded them into AI and was like, what are you seeing at the senior level? What are you seeing, at the mid-level? And to that end, what I'm really starting to notice across at least the charter school world is a differentiation in skills, but really a differentiation in size of the organization. So at your highest organization, if you have more than 10,000 students in your network, I'm seeing really precise and subject matter experts. So if it's in finance and it is grants, that is what you're doing, period. While if you're on a smaller 3 to 5 school or single site, I'm seeing like a pretty broad set of skills that are needed because you're going to be wearing multiple hats while doing the role. And so it was really interesting to pull out and suss out, and something, again, intuitively you would probably think through. But I think in order to stand out in either, I've put up a free resume. I posted about it last week of like, here's how you use a template. But really, it is just exactly to your point, the highlights. How can 15 to 45 seconds you summarize everything that you've done, but quantify it? And again, I just give people snippets like, how can you quantify % of your people satisfied in operations? How have you grown the bottom line savings in finance? How have you done in year over year assessment results if you're in academics? But quantify, because really your resume is the gatekeeper to the phone screen. And so telling job seekers, make sure you put the stuff on there that the entry-level recruiter can advance you. So I think if you're thinking about market trends, how are you seeing folks suss through? Because you bring up AI, you bring up thousands of applicants. As orgs are dealing with this deluge of talent and interest, how are you seeing folks either leverage human or leverage AI in efficient ways?
It's such a good question. It's something we all talk about, right? And I remember talking to a search person a few months ago from a larger firm, and she's like, "We're not allowed to use AI for anything." Right. And there's some folks that have taken that stance where, for privacy reasons or other reasons, they feel like it's a no-no. There's some folks that are using AI to screen resumes, right? I think we've kind of taken a middle approach, which I think is what a lot of folks have done, which is where are the places where you can capitalize on the efficiencies from AI. For example, we always scrub personal information or organizational information off of something, right? Like we're never going to upload to ChatGPT like Josh just interviewed for a job and here's the detail of that. Like we always take off identifiers. But I do think the ability to consolidate sometimes information that we've collected from people is really helpful. The ability to say, here's the competency rubric. What are some really key questions that you think I should be asking? Like those things are very helpful. And administratively, the ability to compile lots of data and information and figure out trends and summaries has been really helpful. So that's how we're using it. I think other people are using it different ways. I would say, though, if you are concerned about AI scrapers reading resumes, I think to your point, even more so having, specific words related to the job and specific, metrics related to the job. And I haven't used it for this purpose, but, there are AI tools that will analyze a marketing post, right? Or something you've written and say, how likely is this to show up well in AI? Job seekers could do the same thing. I haven't done it, but you could potentially, I'm sure there are tools out there for that purpose. But the bigger thing I think is really thinking about a little more expansively, perhaps for yourself, and then making a case more expansively to employers about transferable skills. So there are a lot of folks right now, as we all know, in the international space or in the government space who unfortunately have found themselves either out of a job or are nervous about it or just feel like it's untenable to continue in their roles. And I talk with a lot of these people, you probably do too, but I've spent a lot of time talking with these folks the last few months. And what I'm always lobbying for them to think about is how are your skills transferable to a new sector or new context, right? So if you ran a women's empowerment organization in Uganda, right, and you were the project manager and you got funding for that, and you could be a really great candidate for a women's empowerment organization here in the States, but what are the transferable content or skills that you've learned? A lot of folks are interested in potentially chief of staff roles. And you and I both know, you've been a chief of staff. Chief of staff is the most eponymous title, right? It looks so different in every organization. But having said that, I think about, okay, well, what have you done around project management? What have you done around finance and budgeting, talent? Where are the places that you've played in your role? And how can you align that to this job, even if it's in a slightly different context?
Yeah, I think about aligning vocab. So, you know, again, I go back to academic results, right? Everybody has a niche way of saying norm reference assessment. Some people use iReady, some people use NWA Map. And one thing I've been telling job seekers is number one, use the language that's in the job description. And you can flag in AI, let me upload my resume, let me upload a PDF of the job description or copy and paste it and say, make sure that my vocabulary is matching the job description vocabulary, because you don't want somebody in 15 to 45 seconds having to translate in their brain what you're trying to say. And then I think on the org side, when you're doing this and you're really trying to find highly skilled people, get clear on your vocab. What do you actually care about? What is the actual measure?
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
What are you telling people that are freaked out about the job market right now? What are you recommending to them in terms of how to stand out, right, in this really crowded space?
So one thing I've been thinking is there are jobs out there. And so that's number one. They may not be the same jobs that you saw during ESSER with the federal funding from the COVID stimulus. They might not be in the same organizations, but the sector has evolved. There are lots of jobs in edtech. I will say edtech companies have a higher likelihood of failing than a large school district. That just is reality. So you may go to a more unstable part of the sector, but there are roles there. The second thing that I think about is getting in an organization on a contract basis, a part-time basis, etc. I especially think that about school leaders and teachers that are looking, because if, unfortunately, and we talked about this last time with the patriarchal way people think about teaching, they can be patronizing about your teaching experience. But if you can get that part-time, and shout out to IXL or iReady Pearson, that part-time, I'm scoring assessments for College Board, but you put it on your resume showing that you've done something at a nonprofit or a curriculum company. I think that really helps. And then for you, I'm wondering, when people have these different, skill sets that they're bringing, how do you get a client comfortable with seeing transferable skills as opposed to just defaulting to wanting to see K-12?
It is really hard. I mean, so there are a couple of things actually similar to what you're saying about a teacher taking a role. One of the things I've recommended to folks, if their role's already sunsetted and they're, an open agent right now, is to try to take on consulting projects or fractional work in the sector they're interested in, because people are just a lot more interested or willing to look at transferable skills for a role that's not permanent or not full time. So that's one thing I've recommended. Another thing is volunteer work, like, showing, especially if someone's transitioning from a non-mission based sector, right? One of the things we often hear is, well, do they really understand mission? Do they really care about what we do? So if you can be a board member, right, of a school organization or a nonprofit in your community, or volunteer in a substantial way, help lead a development committee, help support programmatically some kind of initiative, that shows at least that you're willing to give your time to this thing. Also gives you something to talk about, right? I have a friend where she had taken 7 years out of the job market. She'd been a very high level project manager for consulting companies. Her kids are born. She didn't want to be on the road all the time. So she'd taken a fair amount of time off. But she started volunteering, both actually in our temple and communications, because she was really great with communications and writing. Also started doing some political volunteering, and actually got that catapulted her into a whole new second career in communications for political entities, right? So I think that not to discount sometimes those more informal or part-time opportunities as a way to get into what you want to do. The other thing I always tell people about consulting, if you're a consultant, is no one needs to know how many hours you consult each week, and no one needs to know how full your plate is, right? So, and maybe that's giving away the store. Maybe I shouldn't say that, because I'm telling people things they shouldn't, people shouldn't hear. But when I was a consultant, I first started consulting because I had 2 young kids, and I was happy to work 30 hours a week, but I couldn't work 60, right? But I did some really interesting projects, and I think that I could then talk about those projects that I did, and people didn't need to know if I was a super full-time person or a very casual person in it. So I think, again, thinking about project work, part-time work, fractional work as a great stepping stone. The final thing I've been telling people is, in this climate where things feel really uncertain, a lot of people are hiring interims for jobs they actually need full-time help for. They just are nervous to commit to someone. I heard someone the other day say that it was a chief role that was a 1-year chief role because the organization was scared to commit for longer. Don't be afraid by that. I was talking to a job seeker the other day, and she's like, I saw that interim role, but I don't know. Do I want to job seek again in a year? And I was sort of like, well, you might be job seeking in a year anyway, because things are so uncertain. But either way, you might not be, because it might just be that they're nervous to commit long term to fund a position forever. But if you're doing a great job and they are able to support it with the resources or find resources, you might continue. So that's the final thing I would say. I was in a meeting of a bunch of nonprofit search consultants a while back, and the one person whose business is crazy booming is the interim person. So I do think that does interim placements. So I think to not be so nervous about that, to be open to a little bit of a different, not the full-time, I'm signing an offer letter forever kind of role in this environment, might actually be okay, and it might work out great. And especially if it gives you opportunity to get exposure to people or orgs that you want to connect with.
And I would say, our roles forever right now? I mean, how many roles are interim but not called interim, right?
Oh.
I work in an at-will state. Roles are not permanent. And so I think that's one thing I've been trying to tell job seekers. It can be really easy to get comfortable and not keep your network flowing, but it's so much easier to just do some casual 10 hours, 5 hours a month of just connecting with people outside of your organization. Be helpful to other people. The universe will come back around when you need it as well. So that's just one thing I would build on top of it, is beyond all of that. For the people who are like, do I want to be job seeking? Not to freak anybody out, but it's not a bad thing to have your network rolling. So I think that's one thing that I would also, push people.
And that piece of karma, Josh, if I could just double, triple click on this, and probably because I don't know, that's always how I've operated, right? But I think just the willingness to just lend a hand to somebody. You never know. A, it's the right thing to do. But B, you never know when that will turn into something great down the road. Whether it's when I've been job seeking or, I very suddenly, for a variety of reasons, when I was on maternity leave, the reason I became a consultant, I very suddenly found out I didn't have the same job I was expecting. And so I was sort of like, in a tizzy. And I reached out to the 30 people that I knew, right? My 30 closest folks, and was like, hey, does anyone have work for me? And they did. And that's how I launched a consulting career. So, but that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't maintained good relationships and had regular touch points with people and offered resources to them and they offered resources to me and that back and forth. So I want to double click on your point about network, that having those people out there that are looking out for you, that you're looking out for, that you have that mutual support for, are going to be really important in these times where you may need something down the road. And they might be helpful to you. So what's your one recommendation if you had, and it's really hard to make just one, but your one recommendation to job seekers today?
It would be keeping your resume up to date. The number of times that I've talked to people over the last 2 months who have unfortunately experienced a layoff or reduction in force is high. And the surprise that people felt, and rightfully so, was high. And so, one thing that I've been doing to try to commit to this myself, sometimes it's hard to take your own advice, right? But when I add a new client, I add it to my resume. And I'm probably going to do the jobs last for a long while. But what if I want to get back into school leadership or district leadership? I want to make sure that I don't have to spend a really long time trying to remember things down the road. So that my one piece of advice is, whether you're actively job seeking, passively job seeking, very happy at your job and not job seeking at all, keeping that resume up to date is really, really helpful. And I think yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, for me, I think thinking about from the, sort of hiring manager or employer perspective, being a little bit more expansive about your view of what qualification means. Like I said, I think it's really easy to say, oh, this person worked for this org I know, or this person I know, therefore they have legitimacy. Sometimes that's true, right? And we all like those heuristics of like validation from people we trust. But sometimes the role they did was really different than the role they might do for you, or there's just personality differences. So it's never a guarantee, even in that case. And I think that if we're a little more, and again, I'm just a broken record on this, but going back to what are the competencies and skills needed for the role, then I think we can be a little more expansive in saying, oh, this person didn't work for an organization just like mine, but they did work that's super relevant to us. And actually, sometimes it's nice to have someone that didn't work for an organization just like ours, because they think about things in a new and different way, right? So I think being a little bit more focused on skills and qualities that are going to make someone really be successful in a role, and a little less on those sort of cheating, like, oh, they seem like us, I think will get us a long way too.
I agree. Well, I appreciate the conversation. And for all the listeners, thanks for taking time out of your day to come to the higher ground with me and Christina. We hope you were able to look at the landscape with us, and we're excited to hear from you.
Really excited. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.